Part 1. The Assignment. Father Michael Russo had been a priest for 17 years, and in that time he'd heard confessions that would make a hardened detective weep. Adultery, theft, abuse, murder. The litany of human sin poured through the confessional screen like poison, and he'd learned to absorb it without letting it destroy him. But St. Catherine's was different. He'd known it the moment he arrived. The church stood in a forgotten corner of Providence, Rhode Island, a Gothic revival structure from 1847 that seemed to have been carved from shadow itself. Black stone, narrow windows, gargoyles that leered down at passers-by with expressions that suggested they knew something terrible. The parishioners were few, mostly elderly, mostly silent. They came to Mass with the grim determination of people fulfilling an obligation rather than seeking comfort. And they avoided the left confessional. St. Catherine's had 3 confessionals along the north wall. 2 were used regularly, their wooden doors worn smooth by generations of penitents. The third, the leftmost, was marked with a small brass plaque, out of service. Except it wasn't out of service. Father Russo had checked. The confessional was structurally sound, the screen intact, the kneeler functional. There was no reason it shouldn't be used except that it wasn't. Had never been, according to the parish records he'd reviewed. "We don't use that one," Mrs. Chun had told him on his second day. She was the parish secretary, a thin woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. "Haven't used it since Father Benedict's time." "When was that?" 1952. He had it sealed. Said it was unsuitable for the sacrament. Unsuitable how? Mrs. Chun had looked uncomfortable. "I don't know the details, but Father Benedict was a good priest, and if he said it shouldn't be used, there was a reason." Father Russo had let it go. He'd been assigned to St. Catherine's to revitalize the parish, to bring new energy to a dying congregation. Investigating why a confessional had been out of use for 70 years seemed like a distraction from more important work. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. The confessional drew his attention. Every time he walked past it, he felt its presence. A weight in the air, a sense of something waiting behind that closed door. The brass plaque seemed to mock him, out of service, as if the confessional had chosen to withdraw rather than being withdrawn from use. On his 3rd Sunday, Father Russo mentioned it to Monsignor Williams, his superior at the diocese office. "St. Catherine's has an unused confessional," he said over their weekly phone call. "Do you know anything about that?" A long pause. Then, "The left one?" "Yes." "Michael, listen to me carefully. Don't use that confessional. Don't go inside it. Don't let anyone else use it." "Why?" "Because Father Benedict sealed it for a reason, and Father Torres before him, and Father Marchetti before him. Every priest assigned to St. Catherine's in the last century has been told the same thing. Stay away from that confessional." "But what's wrong with it?" "I don't know. The records are vague. But the diocese takes it seriously enough that it's written into your assignment. You are not to investigate or use the sealed confessional." "Is that clear?" "Yes, Monsignor. But it wasn't clear. It was the opposite of clear. It was a mystery wrapped in ecclesiastical prohibition. And Father Russo had never been good at leaving mysteries alone. He started researching. The church archives were kept in the rectory basement. Boxes of records dating back to the church's founding in 1847. Father Russo spent his evenings down there, reading by lamplight, trying to piece together the confessional's history. The church had been built by Father Edmund Thorne, an Irish priest with money from a wealthy patron whose name was never recorded. The building was finished in 1847, and Father Thorne had served there until his death in 1849. His death had been unusual. According to the records, Father Thorne had been found in the church at dawn by the sexton. He was kneeling before the altar, his hands clasped in prayer, his face twisted in an expression of absolute terror. Dead of no apparent cause, though the doctor noted signs of extreme shock and cardiac failure. Father Thorne's journal, preserved in the archives, ended 3 days before his death with a cryptic entry. "I have made a terrible mistake. The confessional, the left one, should never have been built. The wood came from the wrong place. The carpenter used the wrong plans. Something came through with the construction, and now it waits. It listens, and when someone confesses there, it responds. Not with absolution, with something else. I have sealed the door. I have blessed the space, but I can still hear it breathing behind the screen, waiting for the next penitent. God forgive me for what I have brought into his house. Father Russo read that passage 3 times, a chill spreading through his chest. The next priest, Father Marchetti, had served from 1850 to 1891. His records made no mention of the confessional except a brief note in 1851. The sealed confessional will remain sealed. Father Thorne was correct in his concerns. Father Torres, 1891 to 1922, had been more forthcoming. In a letter to the bishop dated 1894, he wrote, "Your Excellency, I write regarding the sealed confessional at St. Catherine's. I had thought it superstition that kept it closed, but I have learned otherwise. Last month, a parishioner, Mr. James Whitmore, broke the seal and used the confessional against my explicit instructions. He wished to confess a mortal sin in private, and finding the other confessionals occupied, he entered the sealed one. I was hearing confessions in the middle booth when I heard him scream, not a shout of surprise or pain, but a scream of absolute terror. I rushed to the sealed confessional and pulled him out. He was incoherent, babbling about a voice, about something on the other side of the screen that was not me, about being told the price of his sin. Mr. Whitmore died 3 days later. The doctor said it was a stroke, but the man was 32 years old and healthy. His widow said he hadn't slept since using the confessional, that he kept seeing things in the shadows, hearing whispers. I have had the confessional blessed and resealed. Whatever is in there, it is not of God." Father Russo sat back, his hands shaking slightly. This was insane. Confessionals didn't have voices. They didn't kill people. Whatever had happened to Mr. Whitmore, it had been psychological, panic, fear, possibly an undiagnosed medical condition. But still, Father Benedict's records, 1942 to 1968, included another incident. In 1952, a young woman named Dorothy Ellis had used the sealed confessional during a busy Saturday afternoon. She'd emerged silent and pale, had walked calmly to the sacristy, and had hanged herself with the altar cloths. She'd left a note. "It told me the truth about what I am. I can't live with it." After that, Father Benedict had not only sealed the confessional but had it locked. The key was kept in the diocesan safe. No one was to use it under any circumstances. The records ended there. Later priests mentioned the confessional only in passing, warning their successors to leave it alone. Father Russo closed the last file and sat in the dim basement, trying to process what he'd read. For people dead or driven to suicide after using the confessional. Multiple priests warning against its use. And that journal entry from Father Thorne. Something came through with the construction. It was almost certainly mass hysteria. Suggestion and fear combining to create psychological effects that manifested physically. That had to be it. But Father Russo couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. He went upstairs to the church. It was late past midnight. The church was dark except for the sanctuary lamp burning red before the tabernacle. Father Russo walked down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The confessionals were shadows along the north wall. The 2 used ones seemed ordinary, unthreatening. But the left one, the sealed one, seemed darker somehow, as if it absorbed light rather than reflected it. Father Russo stood before it, studying the brass plaque. Out of service. He reached out and touched the door. It was cold, not cool, cold, like touching ice, and he could hear something, faint, very faint, like breathing, like someone waiting on the other side of the door, patient and eternal. Father Russo jerked his hand back. Just his imagination, just the power of suggestion after reading those disturbing records. But his hand was still cold where it had touched the door. He turned and walked quickly back to the rectory, and he did not look back at the confessional until he was safely outside. He tried to focus on his normal duties. Sunday Mass, meetings with parish committees, visits to the sick and homebound. He tried to forget about the confessional, but it wouldn't let him forget. He dreamed about it, dreamed he was inside, kneeling, confessing sins he didn't remember committing. And on the other side of the screen, something listened. Something that wasn't Father Benedict or Father Torres or any priest. Something that knew him completely and judged him with absolute accuracy. In the dreams, it spoke to him. Not in words exactly, in certainties. It told him truths about himself that he'd never admitted. About his doubts, his vanities, his secret pride in being considered a good priest. About the woman he'd loved before seminary, the one he still thought about sometimes. About his anger at God for making him choose between love and service. The voice, if it could be called a voice, was not cruel. It was simply honest. Perfectly, brutally honest. And in the dreams, that honesty was more terrifying than any threat. He woke each morning exhausted, the dreams clinging to him like oil. Mrs. Chen noticed. "Father, are you sleeping well? You look tired." "Just adjusting to the new parish," he lied. But he wasn't adjusting. He was becoming obsessed. He researched the church's construction. Found that Father Thorne had hired a carpenter named Silas Blackwell to build the confessionals. Blackwell had been known for his craftsmanship but also for his strange practices. He claimed to source his wood from significant places, locations with history and power. The wood for the left confessional had supposedly come from a tree that grew on the site of the Providence Witch Trials of 1662. A tree where they'd hanged 3 women accused of witchcraft. Father Russo found records of the trials in the Historical Society archives. The women, Sarah Good and Putnam and Mary Hale, had been executed after a rushed trial. They'd maintained their innocence to the end, and according to witness accounts, they'd cursed the judge and jury before dying. One account, written by a spectator, described the execution. Sarah Good was hanged first. As the rope tightened, she spoke, "This tree will remember, this wood will hold, and when fools build with it, we will speak through the grain." Then she died. The tree stood for nearly 200 years before being cut down in 1846. 1 year before St. Catherine's was built. Father Russo sat back, his mouth dry. This was folklore, superstition. The wood itself couldn't be cursed. Trees didn't remember executions. But what if the carpenter had believed it? What if Silas Blackwell had chosen that wood specifically for its dark history, thinking he could harness some kind of power? And what if, impossibly, he'd been right? Father Russo needed to see inside the confessional. He told himself it was to put the mystery to rest, to prove there was nothing supernatural about it. Just old wood and shadows and the accumulated weight of fear passed down through generations. But deep down, he knew the truth. He needed to see it because it called to him, because whatever was in there recognized him, wanted him, waited for him specifically. The key to the confessional was at the diocesan office in the Monsignor's safe. Father Russo couldn't access it without permission, which he would never get. But the lock was old, Victorian era. Father Russo had grown up in a rough neighborhood and had learned certain skills before finding his vocation. Skills he hadn't used in decades. Skills that came back to him surprisingly easily. He waited until a Tuesday night, the one night when the church was always empty. No prayer groups, no meetings, no late-night adorations. Just silence and shadow. Father Russo went to the church at midnight, bringing a small set of tools he'd borrowed from the maintenance closet. He stood before the left confessional, his heart pounding. Last chance to turn back. Last chance to leave it sealed and forget about it. But he couldn't. He had to know. The lock was old but well-made. It took him 15 minutes of careful work before he heard the click. The mechanism gave, and the door swung open with a sound like a sigh. The interior was dark. Completely dark, despite the sanctuary lamp providing some ambient light. The darkness inside the confessional seemed absolute, as if the space behind the door existed in a different reality. Father Russo pulled out his flashlight and shone it inside. The confessional looked normal. Wooden walls, a kneeler, a screen separating the penitent's side from the priest's. Nothing unusual, but the temperature was wrong. Cold air poured from the confessional, carrying a smell that made Father Russo's stomach turn. Not decay, not exactly. Something older, like the smell of deep earth, or water from a sealed well, or air that had been trapped underground for centuries. He should close the door, lock it again, call the Monsignor in the morning and confess what he'd done. Instead, he stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click. Father Russo was alone in the darkness. He shone his flashlight around. The beam seemed weaker inside, as if the darkness resisted illumination. But he could see the basics. Wooden walls covered with carvings. Not decorative carvings, words. Thousands of words, carved in tiny script, covering every surface. He leaned closer to read them. They were confessions. Every sin imaginable, carved into the wood in dozens of different handwritings. Some were in English, some in Latin, some in languages Father Russo didn't recognize. They covered the walls from floor to ceiling, overlapping, intersecting, forming a palimpsest of human guilt. I killed my brother for his inheritance. I betrayed my wife with her sister. I abandoned my child to die in the cold. I stole from the church collection. I bear false witness for profit. I covet my neighbor's possessions. I worship false gods in secret. The confessions went on, each one a small monument to human weakness and evil. And they were still being written. As Father Russo watched, new words appeared in the wood, carved by invisible hands. I broke my vows. I doubted my faith. I lusted after forbidden love. These were his thoughts, his sins. The confessional was reading him, extracting his secrets and carving them into its walls. Father Russo tried to back away, but the door wouldn't open. He pushed, pulled, but it remained sealed. "Let me out," he said. The darkness answered, not with words, with presence. Something was in the confessional with him. On the other side of the screen, in the priest's booth, he could hear it breathing slow, measured breaths that echoed strangely in the confined space. "Who are you?" Father Russo demanded. The breathing stopped. Then, a voice, female though not entirely human. It had harmonics that shouldn't exist in a human throat. "We are those who were hanged unjustly. We are those who cursed the tree. We are those who wait in the wood. The witch trial. You're the women who were executed. We are the memory of their rage, the echo of their curse. When they cut down our tree and made it into this box, we came with it. We have waited here, listening to the sins of hypocrites who claim righteousness while harboring evil in their hearts. Why? Why do this? Why torture people with their own guilt? We do not torture. We reveal. We show each person the truth of what they are, unfiltered by self-deception or divine mercy. That is our curse. Perfect, inescapable honesty." Father Russo's hands were shaking. That's not what confession is for. Confession is about mercy, forgiveness, redemption, lies. Confession is about power. The power of the confessor over the penitent. The power of the church to judge and condemn. You sit in your boxes and hear the worst of humanity, and you offer empty words. Your sins are forgiven, but the sins remain. The guilt remains. The truth remains. We simply make people face it. You drive them to despair, to suicide. That's not revelation, that's cruelty. Is it cruel to show someone what they truly are? Or is it cruel to let them live in delusion? Father Russo pushed at the door again, panic rising. "Let me out. I won't tell anyone about this. I'll have the confessional destroyed, burned. You cannot destroy us. We are not bound to the wood. The wood is simply our door. Behind the screen is not the priest's booth. It is something else. A space between, a threshold. And beyond that threshold, the screen began to glow. Not with light exactly, with absence of light that was somehow visible. Through it, Father Russo saw. He couldn't describe what he saw. It wasn't hell, not the fire and brimstone hell of medieval paintings. It was something worse. It was a place of perfect judgment, where every sin was weighed with absolute accuracy, where no excuse or justification could hide the truth of what you'd done and what you were. It was a place where mercy didn't exist because mercy was a lie humans told themselves to avoid facing consequences. And it was reaching for him. "No," Father Russo whispered. "Please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my sins, for my doubts, for everything. Sorry is not enough. Sorry changes nothing. We will show you what you are. We will make you see." The absence of light spread through the screen, reaching into the penitent's booth. Where it touched Father Russo's skin, he felt it. A sensation like his soul being peeled back, layer by layer, exposing everything underneath. Every unkind thought he'd ever had. Every moment of pride or vanity. Every time he'd judged a penitent for their sins while harboring his own. Every doubt about God. Every moment of anger. Every secret lust and hidden selfishness. All of it exposed. All of it weighed. All of it found wanting. Father Russo screamed. The door flew open. He fell backward out of the confessional and scrambled away on hands and knees, gasping. Behind him, the confessional door swung shut again with that same soft click. Father Russo ran. Out of the church, across the grounds, into the rectory. He locked himself in his room and didn't come out until dawn. Part 2. The Revelation. Father Russo called in sick the next day. And the day after. He couldn't face the church, couldn't walk past that confessional knowing what it contained. Mrs. Chun brought him soup and worried about him with grandmother-like concern. "You look terrible, Father. Should I call a doctor?" "No, thank you. I just need rest." But rest didn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that absence of light spreading toward him, felt that terrible exposure of his soul's darkest corners. The confessional had been right about one thing. He was a hypocrite. He sat in the confessional booth dispensing forgiveness while harboring his own unconfessed sins. Pride in his vocation, doubt about God's existence, resentment at the sacrifices he'd made. He'd thought he was a good priest. The confessional had shown him otherwise. On the third day, Monsignor Williams called. "Michael, Mrs. Chun tells me you're ill. Is everything all right?" Father Russo almost told him everything. Almost confessed what he'd done, what he'd seen. But how could he explain it without sounding insane? "I'm fine, Monsignor. Just a bug." "It's not about the confessional, is it?" Silence. "Michael, you opened it, didn't you?" "How did you?" "Because every priest assigned to St. Catherine's eventually does. Despite warnings, despite prohibitions. Something about that confessional calls to priests specifically, challenges us, demands we confront it." "You knew this would happen?" "I suspected. This happened before." Father Benedict opened it in 1952. Nearly destroyed him. He spent 6 months in a psychiatric facility afterward, and when he returned, he locked it and swore never to speak of what he'd seen. "Why didn't you warn me more explicitly? Would you have listened? Or would the mystery have called to you even more strongly?" Monsignor Williams sighed. "The confessional is a test, Michael. A test of faith, of pride, of our ability to face the darkness in ourselves. It's more than that. There's something in there. Something. I know. Something from the witch trials. The rage of women unjustly executed, given form through a curse. It exists in the wood, in the structure itself. And it judges everyone who enters. So what do? You survive it. You process what you saw. And you move forward." "Move forward?" "Monsignor, that thing showed me truths about myself that I can't unsee. It revealed every sin, every flaw, every human failing. Yes, that's what it does. It strips away self-deception and shows us what we truly are." A pause. "But Michael, what did it not show you? What did it not reveal? What was absent from its judgment?" Father Russo thought back to that terrible moment of exposure. He'd seen his sins, his doubts, his failures. But grace, he said quietly. It didn't show grace. It didn't show the times I'd done good, the people I'd helped, the moments of genuine faith. Exactly, because the confessional deals in partial truths. It shows you the darkness but not the light. It weighs sins but not virtues. It judges without mercy because it doesn't understand mercy. That's its limitation. That's how you defeat it. I don't want to defeat it. I want to destroy it. You can't. The wood can be burned, but the curse will find another vessel. The rage of those executed women is real, Michael. It's justified even, but it's also incomplete. Sees only injustice, only sin, only darkness. Cannot see redemption because it doesn't believe redemption is possible. So I just live with it, leave it sealed, and hope no one else opens it. You do better than that. You transform your experience into understanding. You use what you learned to become a better priest. Not in spite of your flaws, but with full awareness of them. Father Russo was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if I can. You will, because you're stronger than you think. And because God's grace is sufficient, even when we're not. They talked for another hour. Monsignor Williams shared his own experience with the confessional. He'd opened it 40 years ago as a young priest. It had nearly destroyed him too, but he'd survived, and the experience had shaped his entire ministry. The confessional shows us the truth, Monsignor Williams said, but truth without love is just cruelty. Our job as priests is to hold both, to see people's sins clearly while never losing sight of their capacity for grace. After the call, Father Russo felt marginally better. Not healed, but stable. Grounded. He returned to his duties. Said Mass, heard confessions in the normal confessionals, visited parishioners. He functioned, but he was changed. He could feel it. The confessional had marked him in some fundamental way, and he would never be the same priest he'd been before. 2 weeks after his experience, a new parishioner appeared at Mass. She was young, maybe 30, with dark circles under her eyes and a haunted expression. She sat in the back pew and didn't take communion. After Mass, she approached Father Russo. "Father, I need to speak with you. It's urgent." They went to his office. She sat across from him, twisting her hands nervously. "My name is Jennifer Hayes. I moved here 3 months ago. I've been coming to this church because I heard it has a special confessional. One that tells the truth." Father Russo felt cold. "Where did you hear that?" "Online. There are forums, websites. People talk about places of power, places where the veil between worlds is thin. St. Catherine's is mentioned. Specifically, the left confessional. Ms. Hayes, I need to use it. I've done something terrible. I need to confess, but I need to know the truth about whether I can be forgiven. Normal confession isn't enough. I need absolute judgment." "No," Father Russo said firmly. "That confessional is sealed for a reason. Whatever you've done, you can confess it in a normal confessional. I'll hear your confession right now if you'd like." "You don't understand. I killed someone. My husband. He was abusive and I poisoned him. Made it look like a heart attack. Everyone thinks I'm the grieving widow, but I'm a murderer." Father Russo took a breath. "Then you need to go to the police. Confess to the proper authorities. Sacramental confession can't absolve you of legal responsibility." "I don't care about legal responsibility. I care about my soul. Is what I did a sin? He was hurting me. He would have killed me eventually. Was I defending myself, or was I just a murderer? I need to know." The confessional can't answer that. Only God can. And God's judgment includes mercy. "I don't want mercy." Jennifer's voice rose. "I want truth. That's what that confessional offers. Isn't it? Perfect truth. Perfect judgment. I've read the accounts. People who used it came away changed. They knew exactly what they were. They came away destroyed. Ms. Hayes, that confessional doesn't offer healing. It offers only condemnation. Then maybe that's what I deserve." She stood abruptly and walked toward the door. "Ms. Hayes, wait." But she was already leaving, heading toward the church. Father Russo ran after her. He caught up to her in the nave. She was standing before the left confessional, studying the brass plaque. "Out of service," she read. "But it's not locked." Father Russo realized with horror that he'd never relocked it. After his escape, he'd been too traumatized to return. The door was unsealed. "Jennifer, please, don't do this. I have to know." She reached for the door handle. Father Russo grabbed her arm. "Listen to me. I've been inside. I've seen what it does. It doesn't offer truth, it offers despair. Whatever you've done, whatever sins you carry, that confessional won't help you reconcile them. It will only destroy you. Maybe I should be destroyed. No, you should be forgiven. That's what confession is for. Not judgment. Forgiveness." Jennifer turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't deserve forgiveness. None of us do. That's the point. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about grace. But how do I know if I'm truly sorry? How do I know if my repentance is real or just fear of punishment?" Father Russo thought about his own experience in the confessional, about the brutal honesty of having every sin exposed, about the terror of facing what he truly was. "You can't know for certain," he said quietly. "We can't ever be completely sure of our own motives. That's part of being human. But the confessional in there, it will convince you that repentance is impossible, that you're irredeemable. And that's a lie, Jennifer. The most damning lie of all." She was wavering. He could see it. "Come with me," he said, "to the middle confessional. Let me hear your confession properly. And then we'll discuss what you need to do legally, spiritually, psychologically. But not in there. Never in there." Jennifer looked at the sealed confessional one more time. Then she nodded. They went to the middle confessional. Father Russo sat in the priest's booth, and Jennifer knelt on the other side. She confessed everything. The abuse, the fear, the poison, the murder. She spoke for an hour, purging years of guilt and trauma and desperate self-preservation. And Father Russo listened. When she finished, he said, "Jennifer, what you did was a sin. Taking a life is always a sin. But you were in an impossible situation, trapped by someone who should have protected you. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it does explain it. It makes it human rather than monstrous. So I'm forgiven? By God? Yes, if you truly repent. By the law? That's more complicated. By yourself? That will take time and therapy and probably turning yourself in to face legal consequences. Will I go to hell? I don't know. No one knows for certain what awaits us. But I have to believe, that God's mercy is greater than our capacity to sin. That redemption is possible even for the worst of us." They talked for another hour about next steps. Father Russo gave her the name of a lawyer who specialized in abuse cases, a therapist who worked with trauma survivors. He didn't report her to police. Confessional seal prevented that, but he encouraged her to turn herself in, to face consequences rather than run from them. Whether she would or not, he didn't know. But he'd given her an alternative to the sealed confessional's brutal judgment. He'd offered mercy instead of condemnation. That had to be enough. After she left, Father Russo stood before the left confessional again. He could still hear it, that faint breathing, that sense of presence waiting behind the door. "You're wrong," he said to it. "You think honesty without mercy is truth. But it's not. It's just cruelty dressed up as righteousness." The breathing continued, unmoved, unchanging. "I'm going to lock you again," Father Russo said. "And this time I'm going to make sure no one ever opens you, because you don't offer revelation. You offer despair. And that's not what God wants for his children." He pulled out the lock he'd brought from the rectory. A modern one, sturdy and secure. He installed it carefully, tested it multiple times. Then he stepped back and looked at the confessional one more time. "You were created from injustice," he said. "From the rage of women who died unjustly. I understand that rage. I honor it. But rage alone doesn't lead to healing. It just perpetuates pain." He turned and walked away. Behind him, the confessional was silent. But not defeated. Never defeated. It would wait, as it had waited for 176 years. And someday, another priest would be assigned to St. Catherine's. Another priest would hear the warnings and read the records and feel that irresistible pull. Another priest would open the door. And the cycle would continue, because some doors, once built, can never truly be sealed. They can only be ignored. Part 3, The Reckoning. Father Russo thought he was done with the confessional. He'd locked it, warned Mrs. Chun to report anyone tampering with it, and tried to move on with his ministry. But the confessional wasn't done with him. It started with the dreams again. Not the same dreams as before, these were worse. In these dreams, he was the priest on the other side of the screen. He sat in the sealed confessional's priest booth, and penitents came to him. They confessed their sins, and he heard himself speaking in that same harmonic, inhuman voice. You are guilty. You are irredeemable. You are damned. And the penitents believed him. They left his confessional and walked directly to their deaths. Hangings, drownings, pills, razors. A parade of suicides, all caused by his pronouncements. In the dreams, he tried to stop, tried to offer mercy, forgiveness, hope, but the words wouldn't come. Only judgment, only condemnation. He woke each morning with the taste of ash in his mouth. Mrs. Chun noticed. Father, you're getting worse. Whatever's bothering you, you need to address it. I'm fine. You're not. And neither is the church. What do you mean? She led him into the nave, pointed at the left confessional. The lock was broken, not picked, broken. The metal was twisted, warped, as if subjected to tremendous heat or force. When did this happen? Father Russo demanded. Last night, I think. I was here until 7 for the prayer group, and it was locked then. But this morning, she trailed off. Father Russo approached the confessional. The door was slightly ajar, and that familiar cold air was seeping out. I'm calling a locksmith, Mrs. Chun said. A good one. Maybe we should install something more substantial. A deadbolt. Steel reinforcement. It won't matter, Father Russo said quietly. The lock didn't break from outside force. It broke from inside. Mrs. Chun paled. What? Whatever is in there, it's getting stronger. It doesn't want to be sealed anymore. He reached out and pulled the door fully open. The interior had changed. The walls weren't just covered with carved confessions anymore. They were bleeding. Not blood, exactly, but something dark and viscous that seeped from the wood grain and pooled on the floor. And the screen between the penitent's booth and the priest's booth was gone. In its place was that absence of light, that threshold he'd glimpsed before. But now it was wider, more stable. More like a doorway than a crack. Through it, he could see movement, shapes, forms that suggested human figures but weren't quite right. Close it, Mrs. Chun whispered. Close it now. Father Russo pulled the door shut. His hands were shaking. We need to call the diocese. Tell them what's happening. And say what? That the sealed confessional is opening a portal to hell. Yes, exactly that. Mrs. Chun pulled out her phone. Monsignor Williams arrived 3 hours later, bringing 2 other priests with him. Father Thomas O'Brien was in his 60s, an exorcist with decades of experience. Father David Kim was younger, a specialist in spiritual warfare. They examined the confessional carefully, taking measurements, photographs, and samples of the dark fluid seeping from the walls. This is worse than I thought, Monsignor Williams said. When I opened it 40 years ago, there was presence but not manifestation. Now it's physically manifesting, growing stronger. Why? Father Russo asked. What's changed? Father O'Brien spoke up. The curse is feeding on something. Every time someone opens the confessional, every time someone is exposed to its judgment, it gains strength. You opened it 2 weeks ago. That girl, Jennifer, nearly entered it. And who knows how many others have tried over the years, have touched the door, have fed it their fear and guilt. So what do? We perform an exorcism. Drive out whatever has taken root here. Will that work? Father O'Brien's expression was grim. I don't know. This isn't a demon. It's something else. A manifestation of human rage and injustice given supernatural form. Exorcism rites are designed for fallen angels, not for curses. But we have to try, Father Kim said. If this continues to strengthen, it could become more than just a confessional. Could spread, infect the entire church. They prepared the ritual for that evening. Father Russo insisted on being present, despite Monsignor Williams's protests. You're too close to this, the Monsignor said. Too affected by it. That's exactly why I need to be here. Called to me specifically. Maybe that means I have some role to play. They gathered at midnight. The church was locked, empty except for the 4 priests. They set up around the confessional holy water, blessed salt, crucifixes, prayer books. Father O'Brien led the rite. He began with prayers of protection, calling on God's power and the intercession of saints. Then he moved to prayers of command, ordering whatever presence inhabited the confessional to depart. The confessional door flew open. That absence of light poured out, spreading across the floor like liquid shadow. Where it touched the blessed salt, the salt turned black and dissolved. The 3 voices spoke as one, emanating from the confessional. You cannot banish us. We are not demons. We are memory. We are rage. We are the truth you fear to face. In the name of Jesus Christ, Father O'Brien said, his voice strong, I command you to depart from this holy place. This place was never holy. It was built with blood money and cursed wood. We were here first. We will be here last. The absence of light was spreading, reaching toward the priests. Father Kim began reciting prayers in Latin, his voice rapid and urgent. The temperature dropped. Frost formed on the walls, on the pews, on the altar itself. Their breath misted in the air. And then the confessional began to change. The wood warped, twisted, growing. The confessional was expanding, its walls pushing outward, consuming space. It was becoming larger on the inside than the outside, impossible geometry that hurt to perceive. Through the open door, Father Russo could see into the priest's booth. 3 women sat there, translucent and terrible. They wore the clothing of the 1660s, and their necks bore the marks of hanging ropes. Sarah Good and Putnam, Mary Hale, the executed witches, their rage-given form. You shouldn't have been killed, Father Russo said. It was unjust. It was evil. You have every right to be angry. Anger is all we have, all we are. But you're perpetuating the same evil that was done to you. You're judging without mercy, condemning without hope. You've become the very thing that destroyed you. We show truth. That is not evil. Truth without love is cruelty. You show people their sins but not their capacity for redemption. You weigh their guilt but not their worth. That's not truth, that's torture. The 3 women stood. They moved toward the threshold, their forms more solid now. You opened our door. You fed us your guilt, your doubt. You strengthened us. And now we will show everyone what they truly are. We will bring truth to this world of lies. No. Father Russo stepped forward, moving between the confessional and the other priests. I won't let you. You cannot stop us. We are beyond your power. Maybe, but I can offer you something you haven't considered. Michael, don't. Monsignor Williams started. But Father Russo was already speaking. You want truth? I'll give you truth. Not the partial truth you've been dealing in, but complete truth. You were innocent. You were murdered by fearful, cruel people who couldn't tolerate difference. That truth deserves to be remembered, deserves to be honored. The women were listening. He could feel their attention focusing on him. But here's another truth. You've spent 360 years trapped in rage. 360 years judging others the way you were judged. 360 years becoming the monsters they accused you of being. Is that justice? Or is that just more suffering? What would you have us do? Forgive? Forget? No. Remember. Remember what was done to you. But also remember what you were before the trial. Before the execution. Before the rage consumed everything else. Were you only victims? Or were you also women with lives, with hopes, with capacity for joy? One of the women, Sarah Good, spoke alone now. Her voice was softer, more human. I had a daughter. She was 4. They took her from me before they hanged me. I never saw her again. I'm sorry. That was unforgivably cruel. I wanted to watch her grow. Wanted to teach her things. Wanted. The rage was fading from her voice, replaced by something else. Grief, loss, the pain of a mother separated from her child. You can't get that back, Father Russo said gently. No amount of revenge or judgment can give you back what was taken. But you can stop perpetuating the cycle. Stop inflicting on others what was inflicted on you. And Putnam spoke next. We are bound to the wood, to the curse. We cannot leave. Then let me help you. Let me find a way to break the binding. Not to destroy you, to free you. To let you rest. Mary Hale laughed. But it was bitter. Free us? The curse binds us to the tree, and the tree is cut down and scattered into 100 pieces. We are fragments of fragments. There is no freedom for us. Father Rousseau thought quickly. The wood came from one tree. That tree grew in one place. If we return the wood to that place, bury it in the ground where the tree grew, would that break the binding? The three women looked at each other. For the first time, uncertainty crossed their faces. It might, Sarah Good said slowly. If the wood returns to earth, if what was taken is restored, if the circle closes, then that's what we'll do. We'll dismantle this confessional, return the wood to its origin, and we'll put up a memorial there. Something that honors your memory and acknowledges the injustice done to you. You would do this? And Putnam asked. Why? Because it's right. Because you deserve better than this half-existence of rage and judgment. Because I believe even the wronged deserve rest. The three women were fading now, becoming more translucent. The absence of light was receding back into the confessional. If you do this, Mary Hale said, if you restore the wood to earth, we will release our hold. We will let the curse end. I promise. On my oath as a priest, I will do this. The women nodded. Then they vanished, and the confessional door swung shut. The temperature returned to normal. The frost melted. The church was just a church again. Father O'Brien lowered his prayer book. Did that actually work? I think so, Father Rousseau said. He was trembling, exhausted. Monsignor Williams put a hand on his shoulder. You made a promise to spirits. You'll have to keep it. I know. The diocese won't approve this. Dismantling a confessional to appease a curse? It sounds insane. Then I'll do it without approval. I'll do it myself if I have to. You won't have to. Father Kim stepped forward. I'll help. This is important work. As will I, Father O'Brien added. If there's a chance to lay these spirits to rest, we should take it. Monsignor Williams sighed. Then I suppose we're all accomplices to ecclesiastical vandalism. Let's at least do it properly. They worked over the next week to research the exact location where the hanging tree had stood. Historical records placed it in what was now a small park in downtown Providence, marked by a plaque commemorating the witch trial victims. The confessional was carefully dismantled. The wood was old, brittle, but they worked slowly to preserve as many pieces as possible. Each board, each panel, each carved inch was removed and wrapped carefully. Mrs. Chun watched the process with mixed feelings. I'm glad it's going, she said. But it's been part of this church for 176 years. It feels strange to see it gone. Some things need to end, Father Rousseau said. Even old things. Even things that have been part of us for a long time. When the confessional was fully dismantled, they transported the wood to the park. Working at night to avoid attention, they dug a hole at the base of a young oak tree that had been planted near the memorial plaque. This tree is descended from the original, Father Kim explained. They took a cutting before the hanging tree was cut down. This is as close to the original location as we can get. They laid the wood pieces in the hole, arranging them carefully. Father Rousseau blessed them with holy water, and they all said prayers. Both Christian prayers and words of acknowledgement for the women who had died unjustly. As they filled in the hole, burying the cursed wood, Father Rousseau felt something shift. A presence that had been pressing on him for weeks suddenly lifted. The weight of the curse, the attention of the three spirits, was gone. They were free, and so was he. They planted flowers over the buried wood. Roses, white ones, for innocence and remembrance. Father O'Brien spoke the final blessing. May the souls of Sarah Good and Putnam and Mary Hale find peace. May their rage be transformed into rest. May their memory serve as a reminder of justice and mercy. Amen, they all said. Father Russo stood there for a long time after the others left, looking at the flowers, the memorial plaque, the park where children would play in the morning. "I hope you're at peace now," he said quietly. "I hope you've found what was taken from you." The wind stirred the roses, and for a moment, just a moment, Father Russo could have sworn he heard voices. Not the harmonic, inhuman voices from the confessional, but normal female voices, laughing with joy. Then they were gone. St. Catherine's felt different after that. Lighter, more peaceful. The space where the left confessional had stood was filled with a small shrine, a statue of Mary, some candles, a place for quiet prayer. Father Russo's dreams stopped. The crushing guilt that had plagued him since his first encounter with the confessional lifted. He still knew his own sins, still struggled with doubt and pride and all the normal human failings. But he no longer felt judged by them, no longer felt condemned. He learned to offer mercy to himself the way he offered it to his penitents. Jennifer Hayes turned herself in 3 weeks later. Father Russo accompanied her to the police station, helped her find a good lawyer. Her case was still pending, but she was facing it rather than running. That was progress. Other parishioners noticed the change in Father Russo. "You seem more at peace," one woman told him after Massachusetts. "Whatever was troubling you, I'm glad you've worked through it." "So am I," he said. One Sunday, a new family came to Massachusetts. They sat in the back, and after the service, they approached Father Russo. "We're new to the area," the father said, "looking for a church home. We've heard good things about St. Catherine's." "We're a small parish," Father Russo said, "but we're welcoming. I hope you'll join us." The mother smiled. "We've been to several churches. This is the first one that feels peaceful, like whatever darkness might have been here is gone." Father Russo looked around the church, at the stained glass windows letting in colored light, at the parishioners chatting in small groups, at the space where the cursed confessional had stood, now filled with candles and flowers and a statue of the Virgin with her arms open in welcome. "Yes," he said, "the darkness is gone. This is a place of light now." And he believed it. Epilogue 20 years later. Father Michael Russo served at St. Catherine's for another 23 years before retiring. In that time, the parish grew, flourished, became known as a place of genuine mercy and welcome. He never told most people about the confessional. There was no point. The curse was broken, the spirits at rest, the danger past. But he did write it down. A full account, sealed in a document that he left with the diocesan archives, marked, "To be opened only if supernatural phenomena recur at St. Catherine's Church." When he was 72, Father Russo returned to the park in Providence where they'd buried the cursed wood. The oak tree had grown large and healthy. The roses still bloomed each spring. He sat on a bench nearby and thought about Sarah Good, and Putnam, and Mary Hale. 3 women who had suffered terribly, whose rage had been justified, who had nonetheless found peace in the end. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for teaching me about judgment and mercy, about the danger of truth without love, about the importance of seeing the whole person, not just their sins." The wind rustled the oak leaves, and Father Russo smiled. He'd been a priest for 40 years when he finally retired, moved to a small house near the ocean, wrote his memoirs, though he left out the parts about the confessional. Some stories were too strange for public telling. He died peacefully in his sleep at age 84, having lived a full and meaningful life. At his funeral, held at St. Catherine's, the church was packed. People spoke of his compassion, his wisdom, his ability to see the best in everyone while still acknowledging their flaws. "He taught me that confession isn't about judgment," one parishioner said in her eulogy. "It's about healing, about being seen completely, sins and all, and still being loved." Father Russo would have been pleased by that. After the funeral, after everyone had left, the current priest at St. Catherine's, a young woman named Father Maria Santos, stood alone in the church. She looked at the space where the left confessional had stood, at the shrine of Mary with her welcoming arms. Father Maria had read Father Russo's sealed document. She knew what had happened here, what darkness had been faced and overcome. She said a prayer of thanks for Father Russo and for all the priests who had come before, for Father Benedict and Father Torres and Father Thorn, for all those who had struggled with the confessional's curse and ultimately helped end it. Then she turned and walked to the functioning confessionals, the two that remained. She took her place in the middle booth, ready to hear whatever sins her parishioners needed to confess. And she offered them what Father Russo had learned to offer. Truth, yes, but truth tempered with mercy. Honest acknowledgement of sin combined with genuine hope for redemption. That was what confession was meant to be. Not judgment, not condemnation, not the crushing weight of guilt without relief, but honest encounter leading to genuine healing. The curse was broken. The portal was closed. The three women who had suffered so terribly had found their rest. And St. Catherine's Church stood as a testament to the power of mercy over judgment, of love over rage, of redemption over despair. The confessional to hell was gone. In its place, a sanctuary of grace. The end. Historical note. The Providence witch trials of 1662 are historical fact. Three women, Sarah Good and Putnam and Mary Hale, were executed for witchcraft based on dubious evidence and the testimony of frightened neighbors. They maintained their innocence until death. The hanging tree stood in what is now Roger Williams Park in Providence. It was cut down in 1846, and the wood was reportedly used in various construction projects throughout the city. St. Catherine's Church is fictional, but it represents the many Gothic revival churches built in New England in the mid-1800s, some of which did incorporate salvaged materials from older structures. This story is a work of fiction, but it honors the memory of the many people, particularly women, who were unjustly accused, tried, and executed during various witch trials throughout history. May they rest in peace.